This one trick alone will elevate your Deadlock gameplay to the next level, guaranteed. I'm sure some of you have heard of power spikes in Deadlock before. But what really are they? Are they different for every hero and build? How are you supposed to know all of this? In this video, we will make it simple. Your hero, your power spikes, and how to use them to win more games. Let's get right into it. What's up guys, this is Metro, and today we're gonna talk about power spikes for every single hero. And first and foremost, we're gonna start with what are power spikes. Power spikes are points in the game where your character is at its strongest. And every single character in the game has different power spikes at different points in the game, okay? If you wanna know how you determine if a character is spiked, it depends on a lot of factors. But the main three are A, items. So, for example, a very basic one on Dynamo. If you were to gain by a refresher, suddenly you have 2 black holes and you're really strong in fights and it's really scary for the enemy team, right? That would be a power spike caused by an item. The second part of power spikes would be the investment bonuses, okay? And right now in the current meta, this might change down the line. In the current meta, it is signified by a little star. The 4.8k investment spikes are by far the strongest spikes because they give you the most bang for your buck. And this has been repeated time and time again. So for example, on Warden, if I were to buy my first 4.8k investment, and let's say it's in gun, right, and I suddenly do 49% extra gun damage, that would be a power spike. And the third power spike would be me leveling an ability to a point where it's really strong and gets a significant power increase. An example would be something like maxing after burn and suddenly doing a lot more burn damage. Instead of 12, we're going up to 35 on base level, right? Or Yamato, right? Like if you max your 1 to max level and you suddenly do so much more damage because you get more damage and more spirit scaling. That is the third component of a power spike. And all those three things and more play together. But the important part, and what I really wanted to take away from this video before we get into every character in specific, is if you do not fight on your power spikes, you are neglecting potential of your character and you're losing your team the game. The way you want to think about a Deadlock match is roughly a 30 to 40 minute game, right? And during that 30 to 40 minute window, different characters are strong at different points. Now, if you were to play a character that is really strong in the early mid game, and that's the most powerful you'll ever be, for example, Billy, and you continue farming at that point and not really looking for a lot of team fights, you're basically removing the biggest advantage your character has over other characters in the game. Because that time will never come back in that game you just played, right? So if a character is really strong early mid game and you spend that time farming and then only join fights later, your peak has already been reached, right? It's like, it could be compared to sports. In a lot of sports, right? You reach your peak in your early 20s. And funnily enough, it is the same for a lot of characters in Deadlock. A lot of characters in Deadlock have their peak in their early mid game, okay? And if you don't fight during that time, yeah, you will probably end up still doing fine later, but like if you drag the game out and you don't capitalize on your spike, you will fall behind. That's not to say every character should fight in the early mid game. That's why we're doing it for every character in specific, because there's also quite a few characters in the game, hard carries, that really need a lot of farm and a lot of money to get online, and they really have their power spike in the late game or at least late mid game, okay? I'll give you a blueprint for every character in specific. I'll talk about a few points that make them really strong, and I hope after this video you really understand why you should take the fights and when you should take the fights specific to your character. And we'll start with Abrams. I love providing educational content, and it really means a lot to me that it resonates with so many people. And with the Deadlock Academy, we are going to provide the best content on the internet for coaching in Deadlock, period. I offer classes every week to help you climb in no time, and we also have many more courses by hand-picked pro players and pro coaches. And there is really no better people I could think of to help you teach the game to make you a better player. We also do weekly coach scrims where you jump in to improve while just playing the game. Right now there's a 30-day free trial. Just try it out, see how it goes, and I think the results will speak for themselves. So Abrams is not the strongest character in lane. He can exist. He's not super lethal, but he also really can't die, right? So he's okay in the lane, but Abrams has his first power spikes really early on. Specifically when you max his first and second ability. Usually this would be something like maxing 1 first, Siphon Life, or maxing 2 first, Shoulder Charge, right? And most good builds line the build up to where by the time you're maxing those abilities, you're also gonna max out on one of the investment spikes plus getting good items for your character, right? And once you get down the line, especially to your first like 4.8k investment spikes, the first 2, it's going to be around the same time where you have maxed out Siphon Life or maxed out Shoulder Charge, right? And both of those abilities maxed out will provide you a lot more damage. If you have a decent laning phase where you really want to start and continue fighting, especially in the early and late mid game. In the late game, he falls off a tiny bit because he just doesn't have the massive carry potential that late game carries have, right? But on the other side, he's also not great at farming jungle. So if you spend a lot of the mid game farming on Abrams, you are lowering your chances of winning the game. What you should be doing is, once you have your first ability max, and especially your second ability, which is again usually the 1 and the 2, you want to look for fights constantly, because that's when you're going to be strongest. That's when you're going to have the maximum duration of the stun. That's when you're going to have multiple shoulder charges in a fight, and that's when you're going to have a really big Siphon Life, okay? So Abrams is an early mid-game and late mid-game fighter, and he really wants to be active on the map and actively looking for fights during that time and not AFK farm, because later down the line, your carries will do their job. While you will still provide a lot of value, for the record, right? You will still get value, you can still stun, you can still carry in the late game, but you're not going to be able to carry as much in most games as a late game carry. Next up is Bebop, and Bebop is kind of on the same page. He is in a weird spot right now where Bomb is actually back to being like the meta, right? So he's really a disruptor in fights right now, and he's very tanky, and he does a lot of damage over time with his bombs, and he's just being annoying, right? But he's very strong in lane. He can win the lane if he hits solid hooks. So Bebop already has a decent time in lane, and it's on the same page to where he's not great at farming, and you really want to be active on the map and look for fights, especially in the early mid game when you get your majestic leap up, if you're going to run something like Taz, where at this point in time you will have your bomb on a decent level, you will have everything you need to get the value you want, and everything after, right, is just going to add value, right? So the longer the game goes, I want to say, the worse Bebop is going to get. So what I want you to take away from Bebop is he's active at all points. He's not really weak at any stage in the game, but he's also not really the best character in the game at any point in the game, right? He's solid across the board. He's great in his 20s, but he's also great in his 80s. Next up, Billy. Billy is a perfect example, I think, to explain spikes. Billy has an ability called Bash Down that most builds max first, and when you max Bash Down, you add a significant amount of damage to your Bash Down, but the way Billy works is, if you don't know, Billy gets health back with his Blasted. And he gets more health, actually double the health, when he does heavy melees. And once you have Bash Down leveled up to maximum, it counts as a heavy melee attack, which is going to double the health you gain from Blasted, okay? So by the point you have Bash Down maxed, is usually the point where you are the strongest character on the map. And I play Billy a lot, and at the point where that happens, at the point where I have Bash Down maxed, you will see me in 99% of games immediately stop farming and just look for team fights consistently. Non-stop. Bang, bang, bang. And I keep on fighting throughout that time because I know at that point in the game I am strongest. And that's also gonna give my team the highest chance to win the game. Let's assume in a different scenario where I would just continue farming. I just neglected the strongest part of the game I am in, and my team is probably gonna struggle a bit more, and then late game, right, yeah, I'll still do a lot of damage, I'll still be really tanky, I'll still be really disruptive, but I also just spend the time I'm strongest, the time I can help the most, winning team fights for my team, pushing walkers, right, taking early mid-bosses even, farming. And what really inspired this video, little tangent here by the way, is that a lot of people, especially on the NA servers, don't get this. I've been in NA, if you don't know, I've been in NA for a month now, and I've played on the NA ladder. I think the main issue a lot of players have is that they treat every character like a carry, right? Everyone likes money, everyone likes items, everyone likes to get strong, but everyone kind of, or a lot of people, even in Infernus, keep on farming throughout the game, and they don't really respect enemy spikes, and they don't really consider their own spikes. Everyone thinks they are a carry, when, yeah, Billy is a strong mid-game character, but I'm not a late-game carry, right? To the extent a Wraith or a 7 is, right? So when I play Billy, I get active really early on, and that's gonna increase my chance of winning, and is gonna give my team the highest chance of winning. So last thing I'm gonna mention, right? I mentioned that Bash Down max is like where you want to start fighting and you never really want to stop after that, right? Most good builds line this up to where you also get high value items that synergize well with that point. By the time I have Bash Down max, I will also have Life Strike and Spirit Snatch in my build, both bought, and those items both work in a way to where they proc better with heavy melees. And since my bash down now counts as a heavy melee, right, I become like twice as strong. When I have bash down on level 2, I do like half as much as if suddenly I go to bash down and max it out, and suddenly I'm like twice as strong, right? It's a significant power increase. So while my money only might have gone up by like 800 souls, right, or 1,000 souls, suddenly I'm twice as strong or almost twice as strong. And that's really what I want you to think of when you think of power spikes. Which brings me to the next character, which is Calico. And Calico, kind of like a character, a jack of all trades as well, just like Bebop, where she's solid in lane, she's solid in mid game, but the big power spikes again are a bit later down the line. She has a bit more gradual increase in power, right? So she's solid early, solid mid, and solid late mid. So it's a gradual increase. There's not like one significant point other than like maxing Gloom Bombs. If you're going to go the Spirit route, and that's going to add a lot of damage, right? Or maxing Ultimate, which is like 2 points where she's really strong. And then the next point where she's insanely strong is in the late mid game. Once you go to Arctic Blast, where suddenly you combo nukes for a lot more, right? Because you can do the entire one-shot combo where you jump in, Arctic Blast, Gloom Bomb, ult, and they blow up in 1 second. So that is like Arctic Blast is the point to fight. As soon as you have Arctic Blast on Calico, you want to go non-stop and you just want to look for kills. Because everything after, right, yeah, it's going to add more damage, it's going to add more survivability depending on the build you run, but then you're gradually gonna fall off. Which brings me to another point I wanted to make in this video, which is spirit characters, right? A lot of people perceive spirit characters as weak in the late game, which is technically true. The way Deadlock works right now is spirit characters are really dominant early game, right? Like a lot of the damage, the flat early damage you can get really early, right? Like if you go to the 4.8k spirit investment really early, you will do a lot of damage at that point, but later down the line, a character that can consistently shoot, a gun character that can put out damage non-stop, is gonna do more than a character that unloads everything, right? Because in the late game, people will buy items like Spirit Resilience, people will buy items like Spellbreaker. And that's why your characters will feel a bit weaker in the late game, which we'll get to all of them, right? We'll talk about Pocket, and that is 100% true. But that doesn't mean spirit characters are weak in general, it just means they're weak in late. But as a trade-off, Yoshi did balance this game pretty well overall. As a trade-off, they're really, really powerful in the mid-game, right? Before the enemy gets those resist items, right? And that's when you want to capitalize, right? If you capitalize on the enemy's weakness in the mid-game, when you're strongest, you will transition easier into the late game and you will win just because you're ahead in money, right? That's a big mistake I see a lot of people do, all the way up to Infernus, where people farm too much. They don't benefit from when you can just walk in and actually kill an enemy for free. And because they neglect those points in the games last too long. This is especially an issue in lower rank. And when the games last too long is when gun characters or characters that do like a lot of damage over time, like Victor, for example, become really strong. That's why late game carries are so strong in the late game, because those characters tend to be very good at dealing consistent damage non-stop at a certain point when you have a lot of items. Next character, Doorman. And Doorman is, I want to say, the first exception where you can play him in a lot of different ways, right? Like gun Doorman is still like played, but like the main thing I see a lot of people do is run Spirit and run early rapid recharge and get an early 4.8k Spirit spike. And if you get that spike early, you're very strong in lane and you're very strong in the early mid game. And especially strong in urn fights, right? Or just getting the urn to a point and you're a disruptor, right? So there's not any point in the game where Doorman is like insane at nuking. He's a utility character, but he's very solid in the mid game and you just want to be active in the mid game, right? And the Doorman players that are watching this video know this, right? Where you get your items up and then you just run urns, or you're annoying on the side lane, right? Like you force multiple people on you and you teleport out. And that's how you get value on Doorman, right? So you want to be really, really active mid-game once you get your core items, whatever that might be, and don't expect to be a late-game carry. Drifter. I want to say Drifter is okay in lane. I do think he's one of the weaker characters right now. Drifter is very weird because he's not really a hard carry, because he can't really farm, right? The issue with Drifter is he's really bad at farming jungle. So you get your value by getting kills, and that's how Drifter gets stronger in the first place, right? Because you want stacks on your blood scent. While I wouldn't say Drifter is insane in the early mid game, it's kind of where you actually want to fight, because at that point in time is where you want to scale, right? Where you want to get pickoffs. So while you're not the strongest in the mid game, and Drifter still scales really great into the late game, he can be a late game carry. It's a weird case where you get your items, and once you get your, if you're gonna run the melee route and you're gonna go for like Spirit Snatch, right? This is where you like start fighting. Once you have your items active that help you secure kills, right? There's other ways to play Drifter. If you're gonna go for something like Eternal Night Max, if you're maxing your ult, right? You go for Spirit Duration, and at that point you want to fight. This build by ABL is really good because it combines both. Gets like 2 points in everything because the lower value points are really good, right? So none of the 5-point investments are insanely strong. So it gets like 2 in everything. So first power spike would be around Spirit Snatch when you get like all your melee items and your investments up, which I haven't mentioned yet. As soon as you have like 3 investment spike to 4.8k is also where you're really strong on most characters. First power spike would be Spirit Snatch. Second power spike is when you have your investments ready, you have your toxic bullets ready, and then it's a gradual increase to the late game. Next up, Dynamo. And we talked about Dynamo in the intro, right? Like Black Hole is like the defining thing, or one of the defining things about Dynamo, right? So once you get something like Refresher, or you get an unstop where the enemy can't stop your ult anymore, you become really scary. But there's another point in the game where it's really strong, which is right out of lane once you get your rapid recharge. Because if you've ever played Stomp Dynamo, and that's like the main way to play Dynamo right now, right? Up until you get to like ult, Stomp Dynamo does ridiculous damage in the early mid game. So Dynamo definitely spikes in the early mid game. Once you get your rapid recharge, once you get your 4.8k spirit investment. And then he does, I don't want to say fall off, because yeah, in damage and so, like in terms of kill potential, he's gonna fall off. Dynamo Black Hole is the best ult in the game, right? So he never has like a really hard fall off point. Like you're not gonna carry in the late game, but on Dynamo, you really don't wanna sit in the jungle a lot and farm at any point in the game, really, right? Like you want to be active across the map, save your teammates, win your teammates, team fights. So every time you have Black Hole up, look for a team fight, basically, right? Like that's how you play Dynamo. If you farm while you have Black Hole up, you're kind of throwing the game. Great Talon, kind of in a rough spot right now. Arguably the worst or bottom 2 worst heroes in the game, but still playable, I want to say. Like he's really not unplayable, in my opinion. And the most common way to play Talon right now, I want to say, is Spirit Nuke. I've also seen gun builds, or arrow builds, I should say, in this case, right? He doesn't really have a point in the game where he's like insanely strong. Like he's always gonna be Talon, you're always gonna sit on the side lane, shove waves, and you're gonna help your team with the owl, right? And then you wanna show up in bigger team fights to do massive damage with a charge shot, or your gun if you're gonna do gun builds, right? So Talon is a character that is very reliant on the team. He's not great in 1v1s. He wants to sit in the back, deal a lot of damage. So I want to say on Talon, it really depends on your team comp, and it really depends on when your team wants to fight. I don't think you're the person that wants to run around and, you know, look for team fights consistently, unless you had a really good early game and you have a lot of money, which that's another power spike, by the way, which I didn't mention yet. If you are really strong right after lane because you got a lot of money and you're playing like an early fighter, you want to fight non-stop. We'll get to another character here in a second that is really interesting to talk about. But first up, Haze, or next up, Haze. Haze is really strong right now, I want to say. Like she's a very solid character. Most popular builds, max a sleep dagger first and you go for an assassin kind of pick off play style. You can play her in different ways. The reason I wouldn't recommend playing her as a gun carry is because she is great in the mid game, but like she does fall off late game simply by the fact that no matter how farmed you are, you will die so fast because you're so squishy, right? Haze is probably the easiest character in the game to kill. Haze, first power spike, right after you get your 4.8k spirit investment. If you're gonna run the sleep dagger route, or if you're gonna run something like the gun route, right? Renon has a good build on gun. It would be the exact same, but for something like the green investment, green 4.8k first, and then a 4.8k spirit and gun investment. So mid game, you want to roam non-stop, and then obviously, when we get to Curse, which Curse is hard meta right now, right, as at least in high rank, and Haze is like the best Curse user in the game, because you can really just fuck anyone over on the map, right? Like you run in, they don't know you're coming, sleep dart, Curse, ult, and they're usually dead, right? Like, so Curse is the major power spike, and once you have this on Haze, you wanna kill. You don't wanna farm anymore, right? If you continue farming after you get Curse, you just bought a 6.4k item that does nothing for you, technically, right? Because Curse is a teamfight item, and Curse is a kill the enemy item. And at that point in the game, you want to run around and kill enemies, right? That's how you win, right? Like, if you get an enemy pick, you can maybe do a walker or a mid-boss, right? If you want to be the hard carry that 1v6s in the late game, there is better options, like a Wraith, like a Victor, like a 7 even. Next up, Holliday. She's very good in the lane, or very solid in the lane, and then she becomes very strong once you get your first spike, which is usually the 4.8k spirit investment. At that point, you will have a lot of bounce pads, you will have a lot of high damage powder kegs, and at that point, you just run around and look for pickoffs. And it's kind of the same on Holliday as it is with Dynamo. As long as you have your ult up, which your ult is going to be up a lot on Spirit Lasso, it's a pretty low cooldown, you want to look for kills. That's what makes Holliday strong, right? Like, so roam around, ganking the enemy jungle. Early mid-game and late mid-game is when she is strongest. But she can always do her job, even in the late game, right? If you get a lasso on the enemy carry, you're gonna carry the game for your team without being the strongest damage dealer in the game. But she doesn't need like insane amounts of money to be useful. Who needs quite a decent amount of money to be useful is Infernus. Solid in lane, right? But then very weak in the early mid game and even late mid game. I want to say in the late mid game he becomes quite a bit better over time, right? But really doesn't do much in the early mid game until you get your core ready. And your core right now, the meta, if you're gonna run gun, is toxic bullets plus superior duration. That's like the most solid way to play Infernus. And if you're watching this video to get build ideas, I do have a build video. In one of my last videos, I released a best build for every character, which is still up to date at this point. But I really don't want this video to be about the build in specific. I want you to understand when the character is strong, right? And Infernus is strong once you get your burn up really high, once you have your burn max, and then usually you max napalm or flame dash, right? So once you get your second max is another power spike. And at that point, usually the builds line up to where you also do a lot more damage, because you have something like Toxic Bullets, which synergizes really well on Infernus, with something like Superior Duration, which if you extend the burn and the Toxic Bullets, right, like that's when you're strongest, right? Super late game, I do want to say Infernus falls a bit off compared to other hard late game carries, because he's just not as survivable. He just can't frontline and kill everyone instantly, right? Like, he does damage over time. So Infernus, late mid game, is where you want to go, and you want to like actually kill people, right? Ivy, think right now you play her as a hybrid / support character. Ivy is weak in lane, you want to play passive, right? But your core is really ready whenever you feel like it. If you're playing a support build, right, like it might be valuable to even start perma team fighting really early, because you have Healing Nova. You just want to be all across the map, support your team that way, make sure your team wins all the team fights, make sure your team wins the early earn engagements, right? Or make sure that your carry is safe, right? Like, come over to your carry, fly them away if they're getting ganked, etc, etc. So Ivy really wants to be a super active character. There used to be a playstyle, or you can still run her as a gun character, but gun is not super strong anymore compared to other gun options like Warden or like Viscous, who are just stronger right now in terms of damage. A very active character, and a character that definitely spikes in the mid game and then falls off a bit in the late game, right? So mid and late mid game is where you want to be active the most. Next up, Kelvin, same page as Ivy, kinda, right? Like, you're running a support build. And again, what makes Kelvin strong is he has one of the strongest ults in the game, right? Like Dome, which got nerfed quite hard with the cooldown. So what does that mean? If you have Dome up, you want to look for a team fight. You want to look for an earn fight, or you run around with one of your carries, your Shiv, your Abrams, and you just win a team fight, right? And that's how you play most supports in this game, I want to say. Most supports have really, really high value ultimates right now, and Kelvin is definitely like number 2 spot right after Dynamo in terms of value of the ult. So as long as you have ult up, you go, and you really don't want to farm a lot on this character anyways. So just being active in the team fight, actively healing your team, right, like supporting them or slowing the enemy down with Ice Beam, making your team be able to catch them is good. So same thing where you're solid in lane, and then after you get your investments up, which is usually right now Spirit and Greens, this is where you're strongest, and at that point you just run around, you look for value, you look to help your team, and you will get more money by just participating in the team fights, getting assists, getting kills, right? And at that point you're just active at all points in the game, and you don't want to farm a lot anymore. Next up, Geist. Thanos character in the sense of she is strong. She's probably the strongest character if you look at the strength over time. She's strong in the lane, she's strong in the mid game, late mid game, and late game. She never has a fall off point, and that's why she's considered like a top 4 character in the game right now. Because she can win the lane easily, she can win fights in the mid game easily, but she is also great at farming, great at split pushing, and she scales well into the late game, right? That's one of the reasons Geist is so insane right now. I wouldn't say she's the best laner in the game, right? She's like probably like top 4 laners in the game or top 5. And she's probably not the best mid-game character in the game. And she's also probably not the hardest carry in the game, right? Like there is late game carries like Vindicta or Wraith that are better. But because she's strong at all points in the game, you're really free to do whatever, right? Like you're not forced into one playstyle. You're not forced to farm in the mid game, even though you can if the option is good. But you can also join the team fight in the mid game, and you're not forced to not participate in fights at any point because you're always strong. You can do anything, and that's what makes Geist so strong. So Geist, solid at all points. Power spikes at this on this character on a very basic level. Literally every single time you get a 4.8k investment. Usually it's Spirit first, then Gun. You're still insane. Then Vitality, you're still insane, and everything else is just a cherry on top. There's not one single item that makes this character a standout. She just becomes stronger and stronger over time, and she's always solid. Unless you're behind in money, then you obviously want to farm. Next up, Lash. Hybrid character, very solid right now, I want to say Lash. I do think he needs some money to get online, right? Like you really want to get like at least a decent amount of Spirit Burst. And extra items, especially Stamina Mastery, helps him a lot. And then later down the line, everything you do will still add damage and will add survivability with something like Warp Stone, right? Like even Spirit Burn. So for Lash, I would say the main points of when you're strong is right after you max your first ability. Usually it's Ground Slam because you just do so much damage, right? And then after that, it's a gradual increase in power, so you want to be active at all times, right? Join the fights you can. Look for pickoffs in a 1v1 scenario, right? Like Lash can burst if you have a good early game start. If you have a lot of investment, you can burst anyone down in a 1v1 a lot of the time, right? So Mcginnis, usually played as like a hybrid character right now, but with focus on gun, right? She is very solid at split pushing. And she's one of the best laners in the game. I always say this. Mcginnis just has insane damage, the highest gun damage in the lane, I'm pretty sure, out of any character. Other than maybe Haze, if she builds a lot of fixation on you. So Mcginnis can really lane bully a lot of enemy lanes. So strong in lane. She gets strong once you get your investment spikes. Depending on the build you're running, I haven't really played or looked into Mcginnis builds in the last few weeks. Any spike in terms of big gun items, right? Like if you get your Tesla up, if you get your Heroic Aura Capacitor up, or something like Healing Tempo, which is like insane for your team, right? The big 6k items are insane on Mcginnis. I wouldn't really say that there's any major spike in terms of ability points other than maxing Medicinal Spectre, which in a lot of builds you're going to do really early on because it just heals for an insane amount. And that's when you want to start split pushing or being active in team fights, right? And once you get to like Healing Tempo and you have your Medicinal Spectre maxed, your entire team, if they're in there, are going to do insane amounts of damage. You're going to do insane amounts of healing, and that's when you're strongest. But she can scale really well into late game as well. Next up, Mina. This is actually kind of the character that inspired this video, and I think the character most people get wrong. Mina is obviously a top 3 laner in the game, right? Like she's insanely oppressive in lane, she does insane amounts of damage. And a lot of characters I see, or a lot of players I see, dominate the lane on Mina, they come out on top, and then they farm for the entire game. And that's like the wrong way to play. Even if you look at top players like Zergy, which Zergy is a carry player, he likes to farm a lot. What players on the top level do on Mina is usually win the lane, right? Like if you don't win the lane on Mina, you kind of misplay it a lot of the time. And then they fight non-stop. And Mina does have a fall-off point in the late game. But until then, she's like the best character in the game. She's the best character in the game in lane. She's the best character in the early mid game and late mid game, assuming you have a decent amount of money. And usually on Mina, it's more than the enemy team, right? Or your team. If you haven't noticed, like a lot of the time in any games, in any SR, Mina is like high net worth compared to everyone else. And that's just because she's so good. So you really want to abuse those times and get more ahead. There will come a point in time, in the late game, where you won't be able to 1v1 a Wraith anymore. But until that point, you are Thanos, you can't really die if you play it correctly with debuff remover, and you just run around at all points and kill the enemy, right? So first spike, 4.8k spirit investment, you can one-shot anyone. Second spike, debuff remover, you can't really die anymore. Third spike, you also get 4.8k in gun, which is usually toxic bullets, and that's like almost every Mina build. You run around, you kill everyone, and you don't want to farm. Because if you spend that time in the early mid-game and late mid-game farming, again, as I explained at the start of the video, you're removing the point where you're strongest from the game, right? If the enemy doesn't have to be scared of you in the mid-game, yeah, in the late game, eventually you'll fall off. Which is why Mina is not perceived giga OP in low ranks, because in low rank everyone farms non-stop, and then Mina won't feel oppressive. The reason Mina is oppressive is she wins any 1v1 at any point in the game if you play correctly until the late game. And when it gets to the late game, your team should have already won. You should have already have a massive lead if you are playing correctly, right? And even in the late game, you can still do so much stuff, right? So if you have this ready, if you have the 4.8k investment ready, you're around 15k net worth, is when you're strongest and you can kill anyone on the map. You just go around, you look for 1v1s, you look for teamfights, you look for ganks, and you just non-stop fight. And that's how you play Mina. She's not a hard carry, she's just the best character in the game until the late game. And that's how you should play her, right? Like, I'm the best character in the game. I can win any 1v1 if I play correctly. Next up, Mirage. And Mirage is like the first example so far, and we're halfway down the list, more than halfway down the list, of like a super hyper late game carry. He's solid in lane, right? But he really needs his core 3, which is Ricochet, Silencer, Inhibitor. And if you ever played Mirage or against a Mirage, you know how strong this is, right? Before then, Mirage really doesn't do better than anyone else, right? So on Mirage, you do usually sit on the side lane and you farm a lot, and you only really join for teamfights when you can, right? If there's a teamfight breaking out, you push out a lane, look for maybe a split push on a walker, or you join the teamfight with a teleport. But you really do want to farm until you get your core 3 ready. The enemy won't be able to deal damage to you. They're going to be silenced, they're going to be debuffed, they're going to do no damage, and they're going to be healing reduced. And at that point, you can just 1v6 at that, you know, you sit in the back and you just 1v6 them. First example of a late game carry that is actually like solid in lane, but then really falls off mid game, early mid game. Early mid game is still fine because he does quite a decent damage with bursts here. Once you have your Jin's mark maxed. But then in the late mid game, he's actually kind of weak until you get to your Exodia, which is these 3 items, and then you just kill everyone. Next up, Krill. And I don't know why this is, but out of any character in the game, I see Krill misplayed the most. I don't want to offend any Mo players. I don't think it's the most complicated character to play in the game, but like I always see this. Mo, you just get to your Warp Stone, right? You get to your Warp Stone, and then you just run around and kill everyone. That's, you know, your main strength on Krill is you can completely stop an enemy from moving. So as long as you have one other person with you, you will get a kill. All you need is one item to catch up to them, which is usually Warp Stone. You can do something like Majestic Leap instead if you want, or something like Phantom Strike. But once you have that item, you want to look for teamfights non-stop, right? You don't want to farm anymore. And if you farm at this point, you're really lowering your team's chances of winning, because like the extra money you get, like, yeah, you're gonna get a bit less cooldown, right? You're gonna do some damage with Torment Bolts, but you're never gonna do as much damage to an enemy as a carry, right? Like, you're never gonna do as much damage as if you gave that money to your Yamato that's gonna be in at all times. You're never gonna do as much damage as a Victor later down the line. So Mo, solid in lane, can't really die, really good in lane, and then insane monster in the mid game, early mid game and late mid game. And then he does kind of fall off in the late game to where you can't deal a lot of damage anymore, right? You will never do a lot of damage by yourself. So if you want to play a character that carries, Mo is not the character for you. Mo is the character that goes like, fuck you, I take one person out of the fight at any point and I can do that whenever. You get your Warp Stone, and after Warp Stone in any build, and any good build should have Warp Stone or at least Phantom Strike or Majestic Leap, you get to this item that allows you to get on the enemy and get a free grab, and then you run around and non-stop grab people. That's all you do, and you only really want to go for camps if they're on the way, right? If you're rotating or you want to shove out lanes, obviously, but like, that's it. Next up, Paige. Very solid support right now. Paige is the same way as the other supports where... Can you stop yapping? Paige is the same as the other supports where she doesn't need a lot of money to get online. First, major power spike knockdown. If you played against a Paige, you know this. If you played with a Paige, you know this, right? That's what allows you to get an intro pick where you go knockdown and then you put a 3 on them and you help your team secure a kill. Anything after that is just luxury. There's one more major power spike, which is Divine Barrier, which is like a must buy on Paige, right? You are a support character because now you can cleanse your teammate from any damage and give them an insane amount of health, extra health to help them win the fight, right? So first power spike, knockdown. Second power spike, Divine Barrier. Those builds, those item buys line up to where you're gonna have your 2 maxed usually, or maybe even your 3 maxed, and at that point you're really strong. Paradox, very similar to Holliday. If you have, very similar to Holliday. In a different way, she does a bit more damage by herself. I want to say, like, she has a bit more sustain. Like, she's a bit more tanky compared to Holliday, but she's not as mobile. But you play her the same way, to where once you get swap up, you just look for kills, right? And like, depending on how you want to play Paradox, most Paradox players run gun. The abilities of Paradox really don't scale that well with Spirit, and she really doesn't have like the most massive level 5 increases in terms of power. The only thing I could think of is Time Wall. Max level where it silences adds a lot of power, because now after a swap, the enemy usually can't get out, right? If they're silenced, if they don't have debuff remover, they're kind of fucked if you hit a swap through a Time Wall, right? So that's power spike number 1. And then overall, she's very solid across the board at all points in the game, and she doesn't have like one major point. So it really depends on how much money you have. It really depends on how far you ahead or behind you are. But in general, always want to look for swaps, and you really want to abuse your swaps. Next up, Pocket, on the same page as Mina, where he's an incredibly strong mid-game nuker. Maybe not quite as powerful in 1v1s as Mina, but everyone that plays Pocket knows, like, yes, he's okay in lane, but you get your Majestic Leap, right? And at that point, you nuke everyone, right? Even before then, to be honest, like the first power spike I would say on Pocket is when you get to 4.8k Spirit, because then you can do that combo where you jump in, use everything, use Cold Front, and they just die, right? They just evaporate. That's like usually right after a lane in the early mid game. And then the next power spike is Majestic Leap, where you can just initiate with a really big barrage into Affliction right away, right? Early mid game and late mid game fighter. And even in the late game, if you hit an Affliction, it's insane, right? Like, so another thing that I want to add in terms of power spike, Spirit Burn for sure, right? Like, if you hit, like, at that point, if you hit a Spirit Burn, you can, like, still nuke anyone in the lobby. But don't go around and farm an insane amount on Pocket, especially if you had a decent lane. Only really farm jungle if it's on the way, right? Like, Pocket can nuke jungle camps pretty fast in the early mid game, so if a jungle camp is on the way, go out of your way and nuke them. But Pocket will get most of his value by being in team fights or picking off, ganking someone, initiating with Majestic Leap and nuking someone down, right? So you want to be very active on the map. You don't want to play for the late game carry, because that's just not what Pocket is. 7, next really big late game carry. I don't think he's super strong right now. He is playable. He does need a lot of farm to get online. He's okay in lane, but then he has like basically no mid game and no late mid game either. He's like the last character that wants to join big team fights, and he's the last character that you really want to gank with. Like, yeah, if someone is overcommitting, you can go for a gank and a kill, but like usually you sit on the side lane, make sure your walker is pushed, right? You throw out balls, you farm jungle camps, and depending on what you play, the big power spike is when you have your power surge maxed. That's when you start doing a lot of damage, right? Like, usually you max ball first to farm, but then you really don't want to fight, because if you only have ball max, you're not gonna win a fight either, right? So first major power spike is power surge. That usually lines up with something like superior duration and toxic bullets. And second power spike is when you have ult max, when you're really strong, and that usually correlates with the really big late game items, the 6Ks. Once I start buying my first 6K item is when I start really joining and participating in a lot of team fights on 7. Not before, because again, character is just very weak in the mid game and he needs a lot of farm to get online. Shiv, you join the game and you are spiked at all points. Nah, Shiv is insane in lane. Shiv is insane in mid game. There is no clear point where I want to say Shiv gets better. because of how rage works. As long as you hit the abilities in the fight, you will kill someone, right? Like that's how Shiv works. If you have your rage max, your knives are gonna kill them, your dash is gonna kill them, and your execute is gonna kill them no matter what, as long as you have a team, right? And someone is low, you press 4 and they die. So Shiv is strong at all points in the game, and that's why you don't want to farm on Shiv a lot. Shiv just doesn't farm efficiently, right? You don't want to sit on side lane, you just want to look for kills. If you watch someone like Low Main, in my opinion, best Shiv player in the game right now, I've played with him like a bunch on, and this Shiv is insane. He just runs around after lane, he wins lane, or goes even in lane, and he runs around and looks for kills non-stop. Like, he does some sinners along the way, but I've never seen him clear like a lot of jungle camps on Shiv, because it's just not time efficient. And Low Main knows that as long as you create space for your team, you don't even need to create space for your team, because even in the late game this character is crazy, right? He has no point in the game where he falls off. You just kill everyone at all points in the game, and you want to be perma-fighting on this character. That's it. No spike, because he's always spiked. SInclair, weirdest character in the game for this video, because SInclair's power is actually really directly correlated to how good the ultimates he can steal are, right? Like, if you have ultimates against you that are really strong, you are strong if you max your ultimate first, right? A lot of SInclair players I've seen, if they see strong enemy ults in the game, like a Dynamo ult, a Warden ult, a 7 ult, like good ults to steal, they max their ult first, and then usually they will have their ult max before the enemy that plays that character, and at that point they also have a lot of spirit investment, right? And they will just go around and do whatever, right? But it's hard to put like one spike in this video in specific, because it's really situationally dependent. It depends on how your team is doing, how the enemy team is doing. But usually, depending on how you run it, right? Usually it's when you max your first ability. It might be Vexing Bolts, might be ultimate, and then you just go around and you try to go for a lot of value, right? Yeah. If you've played against Victor, the most common way to play Victor is still Spirit, and if you play Victor or play against Victor, you know, like, he's good in lane, and then he does nothing in the mid-game in terms of damage. Mid-game, late mid-game, he's kind of weak, and then he becomes really strong once he gets to like 25, 30k, and then he becomes stronger and stronger, and you can't kill him anymore, right? So, same page as with 7, you're really starting to become insanely strong once you get your first 6k item, I want to say. Before then, a bit more, you can be a bit more proactive than 7 or something like Mirage, I want to say, because even the first max, which usually is Pain Battery, right? Like, even if you get Pain Battery and then like Jumpstart maxed, that's when you start like basically not being able to die anymore, right? And that usually correlates with something like having Torment Pulse and some lifesteal and more power in your abilities. So he does spike a bit earlier, right? Like, if you have a really good head start, you can start. If your team needs to, you can fight in the mid game, but like, you want to farm, because again, the later the game goes, the stronger this character gets, and he's a late game carry. Vindicta, you get your snipe up, and then you run around and kill people. No matter what you run after. Like, I like the Saint build still, where you go Trophy Collector, but you get your snipe to max, and that's your main power spike, and you look for kills with your team. Right? Vindicta, never been great at jungling, so we don't really have to talk about spikes. You will get your money by getting enemy kills, right? And you really want to get kills on this enemy, on this character, because you get more money if you get execute kills, right? Like, you get an insane amount of money. That's how you get ahead on Vindicta, and that's how you win your game, or that's how you win your team the game. Even in lane, she's strong, right? Like, once you get your snipe, as soon as you have rapid recharge, you go around, you kill people. And everything else that comes after is just a gradual increase in power, and not like a massive spike in that sense, right? Like, you buy your first item, and then the next big item, which depending on the build might be something like Surge of Power or Alchemical Fire, right? Like, you become stronger, and then obviously 6Ks down the line where you do ridiculous amounts of damage with the nuke. Viscous! This character is kind of in a weird spot balance-wise right now, where it's all gun. Yoshi just nerfed the abilities so much that gun is just the most viable playstyle. So on Viscous, once you get your 4.8k gun investment, first spike, and then glass cannon is the big one, right? Your damage doubles basically, and then you obviously want to go for kills non-stop because you want glass cannon stacks. You can fight before then. Obviously, Hollow Point is also like, you know, once you get to like 80% bonus weapon damage, so 9.6k is also a strong point. So Viscous's build really reliant on getting your gun damage up as high as possible. So 4.8, 80, so 9.6, and then glass cannon. And then after that, you know, you just keep on farming and you just keep on killing, and then you become the late game monster you are. Vyper, most people play this character completely incorrectly. She is the strongest character in lane, or like top 3 still, you get 2 points in lethal venom, you get 2 points in your ultimate, or at least 1 point, and you do 1000 damage in lane with the nuke, right? So the 4.8k, as soon as you have this, you do 1000 damage in the span of a second. And that's when you're strongest, and then you just want to go around and kill people. Yeah, you take creep camps along the way, if they're on the way, but Vyper is not like the insane late game carry, she's the insane early mid game carry. Vyper is like the character that spikes the earliest in the game. Like you have your best peak right in lane at 4.8k, and then you fall off. More so than any other character in the game, I want to say, right? Sadly. Not saying Vyper is weak, by the way, but that's how she's balanced, where she's so strong early that she needs to be weaker late. And a lot of people still try to play her as a carry, and then you're wondering why you can't kill the enemy gun character that just does more damage, like the Viscous we just talked about, right? But that's why. Warden, very similar to Gun Viscous. They're very similar characters in the way you play them, even in the build, right? So first spike is the 4.8k gun investment. Second spike is the 9.6k gun investment, and then you get to glass cannon. And everything else is just, you know, damage on top. If I can see a kill, I fight at hollow point, but I farm until glass cannon, and then I look for fights non-stop. And at that point, I snowball out of control and become an insane late game carry. Wraith. Main character playstyle right now is getting this early 4.8k spirit investment, so you can do kind of well in lane. If you know anything about Wraith, she's one of the weakest, if not the weakest laners in the game, right? So this kind of allows her to play okay in lane, but Wraith is like any other hard carry, more so than any other hard carry, where you really can't do much of anything in fights, even at this investment, right? Like 14k, you're still not that strong, so you really want to avoid fighting, unless you absolutely have to. And you start dealing damage once you get your first big 9.6k spike, which is usually something like Mercurial plus Surge of Power, right? Or more gun, or something like Capacitor, and then Leech. And that is really what you need on Wraith. It's a lot of money, right? But like at that point is when you become Thanos. So you're really weak at all points before then, but then you suddenly go boop, and then you're insane, right? If you want to play a farming character, Wraith is like the go-to girl. More so than any other character in the game. Victor, again, as I explained earlier, you can start fighting earlier if you have to. There's really, your team can't flame you for AFK farming on these characters because they need to, because otherwise they won't do anything. But once you AFK farm, you become Thanos in the late game. Last but not least, Yamato. Yamato is obviously kind of insane right now, right? With the early, or the power slash buff that we had in the last patch. She's really tanky. Great in lane, but then she has like that weird mid-game point where she's just not that strong. And at that point you need to farm a bit. If you go something like Torment Pulse, again, the first 4.8k spike is probably it. And then the first max, whatever you max, doesn't matter if you max Crimson Slash or Power Slash first. The first 5k max, or a 5-point max, and then the second 5-point max. That is suddenly when you become really good. Especially once you have the 1 and the 3 max, because that is going to increase your damage insanely, and it's going to give you a lot of survivability with the Crimson Slash, right? And then, like, the longer the game goes, she's still an insane late game carry. Not as much as like a Wraith, but super versatile at any point in the game. So, if you didn't want to watch this entire video, there was a lot of yapping. TLDR for this. Spikes are essential to you winning your game. If you have a major character spike, like something like getting an early head start on Mina, and then you spend the next 5 to 10 minutes farming, you just lowered your team's chances of winning drastically. At the point you are strongest is the point you want to fight. And obviously, if I talk about every character, I can't go into detail on every single one of them. This is like stuff you will learn down the line by just playing the character more. You will learn like the intricacies of like that small like little, oh, this is giving me an extra boost. And not everything I said in this video is to be taken one-on-one, right? Like, for example, if you really need Metal Skin because the enemy has a lot of gun damage, right? Then Metal Skin might be a big power spike that you need to win that next team fight. And that's really what makes Deadlock such a interesting game, right? Like that's what makes Deadlock such a high level game in the macro sense, where there's a lot of choices you have to make. But I see too many people getting to their big power item and then they just continue farming instead of realizing, wait, this is the point I'm strongest in the game. I should be fighting so I can win my team the game, right? So that's what I wanted you to take away from this video. Again, has been a while. I have a lot of videos planned for the new patch, which should be coming out hopefully this week, depending on when you're watching this. So I'm really hyped for the next patch. It's going to be the biggest one we ever had in Deadlock, I'm pretty sure. So really excited for that. And yeah, thank you for your continued support. Leave any comments, any questions in the comments. And until next time, see you friends. Bye-bye.